So Genesis chapter 20. Let me see. Let's go 2 verses each. And let's start with Todd and Cherry. Let's start with Todd and Cherry.
Okay, Bill, that's fine. And Abraham journeyed from there to the south and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur and stayed in Gerar. Now Abraham said of Sarah his wife, she is my sister, and Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah.
But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, indeed, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, will you slay a righteous nation also?
All right, Don and Elaine.
Didn't Abraham tell me she is my sister? And she herself said, yes, he is my brother. I acted in complete innocence. My hands are clean. In the dream, God responded, yes, I know you are innocent. That's why I kept you from sinning against me and why I did not let you touch her.
Now return the woman to her husband, and he will pray for you, for he is a prophet. Then you will live. But if you don't return her to him, you can be sure that you and all your people will die. And Abimelech got up early the next morning and quickly called all his servants together. When he told them what had happened, his men were terrified.
All right, Julia and Fred.
And Abimelech called for Abraham. What have you done to us? He demanded. What crime have I committed that deserves treatment like this, making me and my kingdom guilty of this great sin? No one should ever do what you have done. Whatever possessed you to do such a thing?
Abraham replied, I thought, this is a godless place. They will want my wife and will kill me to get her. And she really is my sister, for we both have the same father, but different mothers, and I married her.
All right, Mom.
Muted.
Let me see. Oh, I'm sorry. Mom, you're muted. Your phone is muted.
Okay, sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
And Abraham said, because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will kill me on account of my wife. But indeed, she is truly my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, but she became my wife. And it came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house that I said to her, this is your kindness that you should do for me. In every place, wherever we go, say of me, he is my brother.
All right. Let's go back to Todd and Cherry.
All right. Then Abimelech took sheep, oxen, and a male and female servants and gave them to Abraham. And he restored Sarah, his wife, to him. And Abimelech said, see, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you.
Then to Sarah he said, behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Indeed, this vindicates you before all who are with you and before everybody. Thus she was rebuked. So Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female servants. Then they bore children.
All right. Sorry.
There's one more verse.
Yeah. Go ahead and finish that up, Cherry.
For the Lord had closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife.
Okay. Let me, I was just kind of wanting to show you the maps. Let me see. This is what we're talking about. This is actually Egypt now. This is where Israel is now. So it's this is the Dead Sea right here. And so this is the Negev region that we're talking about. This is Gerar, and this is Kadesh. So it's within this region that Abraham was. Okay, I don't know if that kind of shows you where it is now. Sodom is right around here. Sodom and Gomorrah was around here. This is where Lot was. This is where Abraham was with this whole thing. All right. Anything does anything in this chapter stand out?
Why is Abraham moving into the territory of King Abimelech?
Mm-hmm.
Why is he moving there?
Well, yeah, part of the thing with Abraham is he wanders from one place to another. This is the part where Abraham, even though he was promised all of Canaan, he never owned Canaan. And because of his flocks, he had to move from one place to another. That area, I think even if it was a fertile area, he still would need to move from one place to another. And so every time he would move from one city or one country to another, as he moved an enormous amount of flocks, he would actually come in contact with different kings of that area. And that's Abimelech is one of the kings that he came with. And I know part of his trip is he went all the way down to Egypt, as we found in maybe 5 chapters before. And then he started going up again. And while he was around this area, he had to go from one place to another so that he could feed his flocks. And that's partly why he also lived in tents. So he can move during the seasons. He could also move when there isn't as much grass in there or when water runs out for whatever reason. That's how he comes in contact with so many kings.
So in his moving, he's willing to offer his wife to the king.
That
Right.
makes her nothing.
Gee whiz.
Did you know any place in the Bible where it says that God just set this bunch of men down and said, hey, you guys, don't you realize you can't get along without these women? Your whole group would just die off real fast if you didn't have these women to make all these babies for you.
Well, I think that's part of the mindset back then, is they can get any woman.
Wow.
That women were property, pretty much.
Property, yeah.
And for the most part, the only thing women were good for were making children. And, when it comes to anything from fighting wars, protecting the household, taking care of sheep, all of those things, women were not really part of the equation.
But didn't God feel, I'm sure God felt different than that about women, don't you think? And I would have transferred the idea to the important men that could have passed it on. It just seems so cruel.
And it was. And I think this is where Christianity or just people who follow God really comes in. This is where sin has totally wrecked God's plan to begin with, because this was never God's plan.
I
You
wouldn't
know,
think so.
after God's plan was Adam and Eve. After Adam and Eve sinned, everybody just decided, hey, forget God's plan. We'll do what we feel like doing. And at this point, you know, might gets right. So because men are usually stronger, and I say usually because that's not always the case, but because men are usually stronger, then obviously they have more power. They can overpower women. And because of that, many people really think that they're more valuable. And that was,
I would love to see them have a baby.
yeah,
No,
right.
thank you.
And so I think you begin to see why God is calling people to follow his way of doing things. I know Glad and I were talking today just about that, about how even in Christianity, there are people who are belittling what women can do. And so it seems that even at a point where people have known God, the mindset that the world has put on us still is a struggle to take out. But for countries like just non-Christian countries, and I'll put anything from the Soviet Union to almost every Muslim country out there, you see how they treat women. You'll see the biggest difference if you've ever been to the Middle East. You see the big difference between how Jews treat women versus how Muslims treat women, and it's not even close. And so you when you go to Asia, same thing. You know, you go to Buddhist countries, you go to any other religion of country, most religions will not value women. The only religion that has valued women are Christians, and even Christians have a hard time with it, just because, again, I think sometimes the world's viewpoint comes into play. And so when we read the Bible account and we really look at the way culture was back then, and I know for me, that became a lot more evident when I went to the Middle East. Because in my mind, I'm like, wow, it's what, almost 4,000 years after, and women are still property in the Middle East. So things haven't really changed much. And I'm guessing that it's probably a lot worse back then. If there was no Christian, if Jesus or if God never had people who would influence the world, I don't think women would have a very good life right now. I don't think women would be valued at all right now. And when you look at the history of the United States, we didn't value women for a long time either. It took a while for Christianity in the United States to not only value women, but value people of different colors. So you begin to see how long it takes sometimes for the Holy Spirit to change minds and change hearts. And so even back then, for Abraham and for Lot, you see their biases. You see how they view their wives and view their daughters, and you begin to just thank God that that somehow we don't feel that way, and that because of that, there are women in our family that would never, their children who would never ever experience what it's like to not feel valued, to actually be empowered to be better than somebody's property. That's a God thing, because if it was up to us human beings, I think, again, just look at other religions and you will see just where women are valued at.
Well, God, in verse 3, God must have valued Sarah because she didn't allow Abimelech to take her into custody. So,
Yeah, I think the main thing that really comes up for me here is, when will Abraham learn?
yeah,
Yeah, that surprises me because without reading the Bible, I am just hearing the name Abraham, you just automatically think he's a very godly man. But you find out he's a little bit off center sometimes.
And doesn't learn his lesson sometimes.
All right.
quite a
No.
bit to the left.
Then again, are we much better? I guess.
Right.
But my husband's better. He treats me like equal.
Yeah, I haven't, I just thought
You
this
haven't
morning,
beat
I
me.
am not gonna hit her. I'm not gonna hit her today.
Oh, Sherry, you don't let me. You
I didn't throw her under the bus once. Now, tomorrow, I don't know.
Brad, help me.
What'd she say?
Help me.
Oh,
On that note, Brendel, I was just reading verse 16 and I looked up because I thought it was ironic that it said he gives her something and indeed this vindicates you. So when I was reading it, it said that it literally is a covering of the eyes for you. That vindicate means a covering of the eyes for you.
Mhm.
And so it's ironic to me, if she was her brother's property, or if she was Abraham's property, like we're saying, then they're rebuking her for saying that she's his sister, but yet she was told to do it.
Yes.
But she didn't have
Yes.
and she was willing, I guess.
Well, either that or
Well,
get her.
She didn't have a
Have a
choice.
choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Or get spanked.
Yeah.
But
And
she's getting spanked either way.
yeah,
Yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
either way.
yeah, she didn't have a chance either way. Not fair, Cherry.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, again, if you ever think that this Abimelech right here is a king that never does anything wrong. That's kind of the way kings do things. So even though, and I think at this point she has a point. Now, whether she blames Sarah or Abraham, because obviously Sarah didn't say anything either, maybe that's his point. But again, you got to look at that culture, and at that culture, kings don't make mistakes, and women always get blamed for everything. Which, by the way, not that different today. This whole thing with Adam, just kind of kept going throughout the centuries, and yeah, we can look at Abraham and go, man, how dumb can you possibly be? But as Todd said, we need to look at ourselves and go, have we learned yet? Have we really totally trusted God so that when we come to a crunch, our first reaction is, Lord, I trust you, versus, man, I got to do something about this, and whether same thing about lying to people, because sure, you look at Abraham, he lied. He was just trying to protect his life, right? Yeah. How many times do we lie to protect our own reputation, so that we can look better than who we are. Those are all very Abraham-like, if I can even put it that way. And it's so easy to look at other people's faults. But man, I think when I read the Bible, people like Abraham really give me hope. Yeah. Because the main point here is that, like you said, we have God who comes right in and says, no, I have a plan. And even Abraham can't screw up my plan. You know, there has to be a time when I have to come in and take care, because I understand that Abraham is a human being, that Abraham sometimes forgets, and that no matter what Abraham does, he's still my child. And I know for me, it took me a while to get that, because there are times in my life where I also made a mistake, and all of a sudden I'd be like, forget it then. You know, there's no way God can fix this. There's no way I want God to fix this, because, you know, I'm just a screw up type of a thing. And I learned that the stories are here, not for us to laugh at Abraham, but to show us how God really is. That we can have a God that we can trust with our own humanity, with our own frailty. And I think for me, that gives me a lot of hope, but it should also give me a lot of patience for people who might take a while to learn stuff, who might take a while to surrender to God. Because, like you said, if Abraham struggled, you know, and he talked with God, he and God were talking under the tree. He had visions. God was giving him all kinds of signs that he argued with God. I mean, that's how close Abraham was with God. And then when it came to some situations, Abraham was like, no, this is the way culture is. Forget God at this point. I'm going to go with my own culture. I'm going to go with my own thinking. And again, we can laugh at Abraham, or we can kind of roll our eyes and shake our heads. But I know for me, I can't do that, because I know where I'm hoping that I don't ever make some of the mistakes I made before when it comes to faith in God. But this is why I pray every day, because it can happen. All it takes is, those moments where you come in contact with, I don't know, your life being threatened, your reputation being threatened, or your whole viewpoint being threatened. And it's so easy to go back into lying.
I've always been encouraged that the Bible has warts and all, shows the warts and all. Right. Otherwise, I would never feel worthy or feel like I could ever, get on top of this with God. And so.
Right.
In the story here, Abraham moves into the territory of Abimelech and offers him his wife as a gift. And Abimelech refuses, but also gives Abraham a whole bunch of animals and servants. So how do we explain that? God told him, that you're doing, that Abraham did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But why is Abimelech giving the animals and servants to Abraham?
Again, you begin to see, for me anyway, it seems to me that Abimelech begins to humble himself before God. And yeah, you're right, because you look at 17 and 18 and a whole bunch of women becomes infertile. And what did they do? you also begin to see how in God's eyes, a person's actions has some serious consequences, not just for themselves, but for many people. And I'm not sure I'm smart enough to understand that. But I know I'm careful enough that for me, I've seen many instances in my life when what I did has affected Gladys and vice versa. And I'm sure you've probably seen how something you did has affected your kids. Because anything we do just doesn't affect us. I do believe that part of the 1,000 years is us apologizing to each other for a lot of things.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think there's also just us weeping over the consequences of what we have done as a church to our community, as a parent to our kids, to our immediate and extended family. I believe that what we're seeing now is that sometimes God doesn't take away the consequences of what people have done. And for Abimelech, it seems to me that he goes way overboard even as an act of humility. According to verse 14 to 16, his actions was basically saying, Sarah, I want to let you know that this is not your fault.
Yeah.
I have no idea what Abimelech did. I mean, obviously, if you're going to marry somebody, there's got to be a honeymoon night somewhere. And I don't know if there was one, you know, and I don't know if Abimelech just started saying, because obviously he got angry because all of a sudden he gets this vision, right? And he realizes that now his whole country is affected because one man lied to him. But this is also where we might have to ask the question that in God's eyes, Abimelech, because of his relationship with God, which at this point we can assume he didn't have one. I think the other thing we need to start considering is once we give our lives to God, our value to God goes a little bit higher than everybody else's who doesn't give their life to God. I think you will also see that in many texts throughout the Old Testament, how God actually says, because of what Abraham did, and he says this to Israel, who, you know, have done so many things wrong, because of my promise to Abraham, I will spare you. You will see that said time and time again. And it seems to me that what we do can have its evil consequences, but what we do for God also has its blessings for the next generation, even after we're long dead and gone. Every decision we make for God might not cover up our mistakes, because that's the one thing that the Bible will show us, but it will start adding all kinds of blessings to the next generation. And I think for Abimelech, he just wanted to make sure, you know, I got to make this right. And his humility shows his respect for God, or his fear. Sometimes they look the same, right?
What nation was Abimelech part of?
It's Gerar,
Oh, okay.
and that's the one I showed you in the map.
So they were Gerarites then, or something like that.
Yeah, that's what my guess would be.
Okay.
Never
So
heard
do
of
we
it.
know, were they like a heathen nation?
Absolutely. All the Canaanite nations were heathen. We can
So-
assume that.
So part of me is thinking that to have a vision from a God who tells them the truth, that had to be quite life-changing,
Yeah,
you know?
right. And the sad part, I think, of this story, which is never said, Abimelech didn't say, all right, I'm going to worship your God from now on. Didn't
Right.
even say that. He's just like, here's some money, get out of here. You and your God, get out of here. You're messing up my life. Totally missed the whole lesson he could have learned from that.
Oh, my.
But it's interesting that he didn't tell him to leave because he told them they could dwell anywhere in his land.
Right. I'm sorry. You're right.
Egypt, they told him to
Get out of here.
get out of here. Egypt told them to leave, the king of Egypt.
Right. Right. Right.
Well, I guess that was kind of what I was thinking, is that, you know, here you have this God that tells you this, tells you the truth, and then all this is happening to their women that can't have children. You know, he probably was like, I don't think I want to mess with Abraham and his God. So here, take everything, take all the stuff. Yeah, yeah, you know, you dwell where you want to dwell with, just, you know, don't send any more curses our way, you know.
Right. Right. Yeah, you can see he was, I think it even says here, maybe it was my translation. He said he was scared.
Yeah.
He had fear. I think I read that somewhere here, but so this is an action just much like the Egyptians were,
It says
know,
his
just
men were terrified.
there you go. Right. So I'm guessing, you know how the Egyptians were terrified after their firstborn got killed. They just gave everything to the Egyptians. Whatever you ask for, just get out. And I think everybody was kind of had that same mentality.
Yeah.
The sad part here, and I'm going to assume, again, this is one of those things where we don't know. I'm going to assume that when Abraham left there, he actually gave that 1,000 pieces to God or to Melchizedek or somebody. Just basically said, yeah, this, I goofed up.
I don't want to be rewarded for doing something wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a feeling, I'm hoping they did that, or at least apologize to God. We don't read that. So maybe that's assumed. But I know for me, I'm the kind of biblical student that doesn't assume anything. Just whatever, just go ahead and question stuff. But for me, I would think that would be because, you know, Abraham prayed to God for Abimelech. We see that, right? And he healed Abimelech and his wife, and he healed all the women that got infertile. But somehow, see, I think for me, if I was Abraham, you know, I'd give something to Abimelech and just say, I'm sorry, you know, I really goofed up, but we don't read that anywhere.
Well, how long was this period?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing. I mean, would they have, I mean, was this after Abraham and Sarah had left that the women became barren? Or was it during the time that they were there? Because they'd had to been there quite a while in order to notice that women were not getting pregnant.
Right. And it's really tough to even figure this out, but obviously this had to be sometime before Isaac was born.
Right.
And sometime after Sodom and Gomorrah was burned. That's an assumption just because of where this chapter is. And from that time, it's at least 10 years. At least. You know,
So was
and
Sarah with Abimelech that long?
that's Good question.
That's-
There's nothing in the text that would tell us what happened or how long they were there.
Yeah.
I bet
But-
she's one hot wife.
Right. But, you know, I don't think it's one day.
No.
I don't even think it's a week.
Yeah.
Because how in the world are all the women going to go, wait a minute, I'm barren? It had to take at least a month before
Right.
all the women are like, wait a second.
Nobody's
I-
having any kids.
All
Nobody's
of us are
pregnant.
late. What's
Yeah.
going on?
Right.
Right. So anywhere from a month to 10 years. How's that?
Well, that's a good way to narrow it down.
Right. Oh boy. All right.
But I
Yeah.
think one,
2 years. for-
I was gonna say one thing that you do get out of it is Abraham willingly admitted his error.
Mhm.
And I think that's something we should see too, as well, is that God was patient with him, but he was also humbled himself and admitted his error.
See, this is I'm trying to figure out, how did you know he admitted his error?
Because it says in verse, the guy said, why have you done this to us? And he said, I've offended, that he was offended. And Abraham said, because I thought this. So he admitted that he thought that they would kill his wife.
Okay. Because that would be, because I think he's making an excuse here. I think he actually says, yeah, she kind of is my sister, but I married my sister. Maybe that in itself is an assumption that we say he said sorry, or this is my fault. But basically, it seems to me that Abraham blamed, he says, this is a godless place, right? So he basically said, it's really your fault because you guys are just mean people. That's the way I'm seeing it. And you guys will want my wife and kill me. That's why I did it.
11 or so.
I don't, do you see, I don't know, Terry, do you see him actually apologizing when he said that?
The way you put it, no, but now I don't see that. But I think, why would he pray to God if he wasn't at the very end, if he wasn't sorry
Right.
for what he'd done?
You're right. No, I think that part probably shows that he had he started apologizing. At the very least, I hope he apologized to God.
I do too.
Mhm.
But I get your point. I'm mistaken.
No, I don't think it's a mistake. Again, it's a thin line. It can go either way, I think. So I just asked because I wanted to know where you were coming from, and I can see it. I can definitely see it. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording. Thank you for joining us at our prayer and Bible study session as we journey through the Bible one chapter at a time. We realize that you might have some questions or comments on the things that we discussed today. And if you do, please feel free to fill out the form below. Also, if you would like to have your own Bible, please fill out the form below and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time at our prayer and Bible study session.